Welcome to Sustainable Packaging with Cory Connors. Today's guests are Nick Gardner with Element and Madison Savilow with OCO. How are you both doing today? Madison, let's start with you. I'd love to hear how you're doing and what your background is in this world of packaging.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having us on. So I work at OCO. It's a consumer products brand under the umbrella of carbon upcycling technologies. We're a Canadian carbon capture and utilization company. So the work that we're doing is a bit broader than packaging, more in just the consumer world, but we do partner with packaging companies to basically embed CO2 emissions into their products through our platform technology and improve the performance of the material as well. So yeah, that's how I got into it, was through OCO and meeting Nick.
Wonderful. And where did you work before? Have you always been in sustainability?
Yeah, I started at Carbon Upcycling Technologies when I was still in university. I was looking for just a laid back part-time job and ended up at a startup, which was nothing of this sort, but I fell in love with the industry and I've been with them ever since. And we were actually finalists in the Carbon X Prize. So it's a global competition.
Wow.
That we did to scale up our technology. And from that, within the context of that prize, is where we started working with consumer products and really demystifying what carbon tech is for consumers and just broader audiences with tangible products that they could touch and feel. And this material was a little bit easier to understand at that point. But that's how I got into it. I've always been in this space.
That's exciting. Mr. Gardner.
So thank you for having us, Cory. My name is Nick Gardner. I'm the co-founder of a company called Element Packaging. I'm currently working from my office in Boca Raton, Florida. We have offices in California and Los Angeles, in New York. We have an R&D center in Korea. We have been in business for a little under 6 years. We're coming up to our 6th anniversary. I built the business with my co-founder. We both came from much larger packaging companies that specialize in the color cosmetics, skincare, makeup and body care world. Our customer base are the large scale CPG companies, people like L'Oreal, Unilever, Shiseido. From the day we started, we had an aversion to the way that many of our competitors were running their business. There was this emphasis on making it cheap, making it in China, and I don't want to be disparaging to China, but we didn't see that as a viable business model for us. And one thing that bothered us was the lack of thought of what we were doing to the planet. And we could see vast amounts of plastic waste being generated by our industry. And so we had a sort of a mission and very strong bias towards trying to make more sustainable products. We consider ourselves to be materials agnostic. So we work in aluminum, we work in paper, we work in all sorts of different resins. At the time when we first started, the bulk of our primary packaging would have been made in injection molded ABS-AN and the likes. But we saw a space where we could use material science to move forward and to go into different areas. I came across Carbon Upcycling, which is Madison's parent company, through Material Connections, which is a materials library in the US that we are a member of. And I was always massively interested in the whole concept of carbon sequestration and capture. I thought it was just a really interesting science. So when I was at Material Connections, I spoke to a gentleman by the name of Dr. Andrew Dent, who runs Material Connections. And he said, oh, you should see this company. They're really cool. They're taking CO2 emissions and putting it into concrete. Concrete is one of the world's largest emitters of CO2. It's also one of the world's most widely used resources. I believe it's number 2 after water. And Madison would speak more, better about that. So I basically got lucky and I phoned them up and said, if you guys can do this in concrete, and I happened to get through to one of Madison's partners, Peter. I said, if you guys do this in concrete, can you do it in plastics? And they said, yeah, we've already done it. In fact, we started doing it in plastics, but we've moved on because we think concrete is a better option. So we set out on this journey together. It's been very well received. We're both proud that we can honestly say we're the first companies in the world to have introduced consumer products that will be making their way onto the shelves of various different Sephora stores and Ulta stores and that kind of thing. We can come on in a second and Madison can speak in a much more better way about what we actually do in the process. Yeah, we're very pleased that we think we have invented this between the two companies.
Incredible. It's an awesome beginning. And thank you so much, Nick, for explaining it to us. Madison, I'd love to hear, like Nick said, how does it work? So you're capturing carbon from the atmosphere and putting it into packaging materials?
Yeah, so all of our facilities right now are based in Calgary. We are working on more modular versions of our carbon capture and utilization process. So those are actually just being manufactured now. So we should have those units pretty quick where they can be deployed more decentrally than us just being based here in Calgary. But essentially how the process works is we take CO2 right now from point source emissions. So we're based at a natural gas plant. We'll take the flue gas from the flue gas stack, so the release of the emissions, and we'll sequester and store that into inorganic solid powders. So the powders that we use primarily within the plastic sector are magnesium silicate, and the other one is low-grade graphite powder. So there's a couple of different materials that we end up with. The CO2 sequesters permanently to that material, and that's how we get, our advanced material, advanced additive that can then go into a resin. We have used atmospheric CO2 previously, so we had partnered with Climeworks out of, I believe, Switzerland is where they're located, and Carbon Engineering in Vancouver area. And so they sent us tanks of CO2. So we did have a version of this that was made from atmospheric CO2, but just for travel of those CO2 tanks, we typically opt for point source where it's a little bit more available to us.
That makes a lot of sense. You don't want to be trucking it or shipping it around the world because you're creating more CO2. So
Right.
Very important point. So your company, Madison, captures the carbon and makes the material. And Nick, tell us what your company does with it.
So what we do then, Cory, is we take from our partners what would be considered to be in the plastics industry an additive. I'm actually not going to define it with just the plastics industry because we'll come on to what else we're doing in a minute. But if you were to take something like a mascara, for example, we are dealing with a sad inevitability. We as a manufacturer of these kind of products, we make a lot of mascaras, and there are none. I would hesitate to say there are no mascaras ever recycled. That is just not possible. So what we do is we take the Madison's product, which would be CMS, carbonated magnesium silicate, as an additive, and we put it into PCR. So we are taking post-consumer recycled polypropylene, for example. We do this in various different places. We prefer to keep it closer to the emission source, so preferably North America. We will take that material and then we will add it into an injection mold and then add that into the waste PCR. So we've found that what we're doing is we're dealing with an inevitability. There will be arguments that only 10% of anything is ever recycled in the US. Now, we are a member of PACT, which is a take-back program within the beauty industry. We also talk to wonderful people like TerraCycle. We will talk to anybody about bringing materials back. But the reality is, at the moment, in the US, recycling rates are at most 10%. If you listen to Greenpeace, they will say it's 5%. So
you're talking about beauty packaging, like small plastic containers that are made for beauty products that are very difficult to recycle. You're
impossible.
You're not talking about paper and things like that. Okay.
No.
I want to make sure.
So to define, we're talking about the things that we make, things that look like that. For example,
very challenging to recycle those. Yes,
they'll almost never get recycled. What we're doing is we're dealing with an inevitability. We are working on the assumption that if we take a polypropylene mascara, for example, that because of its sheer physical, the sort of rule of thumb within our industry is anything that is smaller than 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches in any work diameter will never be collected by a MRF. And we have dealt with many of the biggest MRFs in the country. We've been there, visited them. We've tested our products. And we know that they can't recycle these products. So we know that these things are going in landfill. So we're working on a really basic assumption that we are in effect creating a carbon sink, because
Hmm.
Madison is trapping the whole CO2 molecule. We are adding that then into waste plastics, PCR. We are not using CO2 to generate more plastic. We are not plastic haters. We are a plastics using company. We understand the virtues of plastic. They don't have to be told to us. But we're dealing with the back end of it, which we don't think many manufacturers in our space think about. Now, we know that they will end up in landfill, 90% chance. So we're assuming that we're creating a carbon sink. We're locking in the CO2. There is one, however, side effect to this, which is wonderful. We have found that when we add our material, we get much better recycling rates from the PCR once we've added our material. So if you work on the assumption that polypropylene, if we can, the likelihood of us ever getting our material back realistically is very small. But we have found through many different tests that polypropylene typically, I think the sort of the consensus view is that you can recycle it maybe 4 times before the polymer bonds break down. And I'm willing for any polymer scientist to correct me on this, but and I'm not a polymer scientist, as I think we all know. It will typically be recycled at most 4 times before it breaks down and cannot be used again. We have found that with our additive, we're up to 6, maybe 7 times. So people will say to us, well, you're not really adding that much CO2 into the product. Again, we would differ with that because in certain products we can get up to 20, 30%, right? It depends on it depends on what the product is, stress testing, the whole 9 yards. Every one of these products we make is different. So our ultimate goal would be for almost everything that we make to contain the material, and then we add it back every time we get it back to create better waste. We don't know that anybody else is doing this. We've not yet managed to find anybody else who's done this. So as I said, we're not taking CO2 and fermenting it and turning it into more plastic. And there are companies, and they're fine companies who do that. We're not doing that at all. We're taking waste and making better waste.
Wow, very exciting. This is a totally novel idea. I've never heard of this before. I'm really interested to hear more about it. Madison, can you walk us through a little bit more of the process? You mentioned it gets turned into a powder. How does that get captured? There's a certain filtration system on the stack at the factory?
Yeah, so we're not changing the CO2 from the flue gas into a powder. We're sequestering that flue gas or the CO2 into a powder that already exists. So we'll use magnesium silicate or graphite powder to sequester and store that CO2 molecule essentially. And then you have that in a solid form, and that's how you can add it to other products. So yeah, we have basically what's called a slipstream off of the flue gas stack. So you can imagine it as an additional pipe off the side of a pipe that would otherwise been an emission. And that gets funneled to our unit, our carbon capture unit. The ones that we run our consumer products work in, those ones are like big mills. So we will pressurize these vessels essentially with the CO2 once we already have that inorganic solid powder in that vessel. And then we rotate them for a number of hours. And what that does is it exfoliates the particle of powder. So it breaks down the particle size and increases the surface area. And that leaves an absorption site for the CO2 molecule to attach to them. And that's really what we're doing. And then we simply offload that, and we can take it to end customers, whether that's in the packaging sector, textiles. We do work in ink and dye as well. So there's a lot of different spaces that we can play within just because it's such a versatile material.
Incredible. And you said you're launching some mobile units. Will these mobile units be used in factories around the world someday? Is that the intention?
That's the idea. If we can decentralize the way that we process our materials, that of course just reduces the shipping, and we can use local materials as well as feedstocks potentially. There's other materials we can use as solid feedstocks. We know this very well from our work in the concrete and building materials sector. But yeah, ideally, we place them at manufacturing sites for consumer goods or for packaging, sequester the CO2 right there at the site, and then allow them to use the material.
What's the capital investment for something like that? Let's say I own a factory, I'm making widgets, and I want to do a carbon capture program right at my factory. What would something just rough for an entry level unit?
Really depends, because we can be very flexible with the size of these units. We can even do small bench scale units that sit on a desk at a lab. So they range anywhere from $10,000 to, if you want really big industrial size, like 10 million. So it really depends on the size of reactor that you're looking for. We call it reactor. It's a black box term, but we basically where we do our process. So they really range in capex and size, and we can tailor it to the need.
I could see that scaling around the world and solving this, or at least making a big impact on this climate issue of global warming. Well done. Good job, Madison, and your team. And you too, Nick. What else should we tell the people about? How can we relate this to somebody?
Yeah, we are not confined to, we're not confined to plastics.
Sure.
We're certainly not confined to the beauty world.
Sure.
We would like, part of the reason why we're talking to you is we'd like exposure to other industries. I think we've made a fairly good job thus far of getting to the beauty companies, and they get it. There is margin within those companies and what they spend on packaging. But also, our additives we have food grade FDA approved levels that we can add product in. So we'd love to see it in the food industry. We'd love to see it in industries where people are making things like plumbing fixtures. So I'd like to make a carbon sink. So if anyone from Cola is listening and they want to ring up, the average American household changes their plumbing fixtures every 10 years, something of that nature. If we can create enough spaces where there are large scale products that are sitting there that contain large amounts of our CO2, and they're sitting there and they're not particularly damaging, they're inert. We would like to talk to the car industry. There are benefits that Madison could probably speak to more than me about the strength of what we're doing with waste plastic. But as I said, what we want to do is we want to keep it in the waste industry. That also, we're making no big secret about this. We're talking to paper companies. There's no reason why we couldn't put it in corrugate. There's no reason why we couldn't put it in, secondary packaging. There's no reason why one of the most successful products we've had at the moment, we put it in tubes. So we put it into LDPE, 4-layer tubes. And that to us is a really obvious use of the material because there are no tubes ever recycled. I would like to say that people are doing it.
When you say tubes, can you define?
Yeah, cosmetic tubes.
So low density polyethylene. Okay, a packaging item. Okay, I see.
Yeah, but also then you could take other things. Other things are tubes. Piping is tubes. Anything really.
The automotive industry makes a lot of sense. I like that a lot.
That is so obvious to us because, as I said, these things are not recycled, right? Ever. But if you have something that, if you look on your desk now, Cory, and I'm looking at you, you're wearing your headphones. There's no reason. I'm sure you're going to keep your headphones for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. There's no reason at all why we couldn't load your headphones. You've got EVA foam head cups. We could put it in there. I can put it in the cable that's attached to your headphones. You're talking to me on a PC. We could put it in the back of the PCs. We could put it we'll put it anywhere.
I was thinking the electric vehicle industry, as we all know, skyrocketing because of those legal changes. What if we put it into the cords that charges the electric vehicle?
If Mr. Musk wants to give us a ring, we're all ears.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too. For us at OCO, it's very much focused on moving beyond waste. So we're looking at circular economy and completely bypassing the waste sector entirely. So there's this new movement on cradle to cradle. So we know cradle to grave, but how do we take a material or a product and just keep regenerating, using it in different ways, keeping that material in the life cycle as much as possible? And that's our real focus, is being this new frontier of circular materials. That's something that we say a lot at Carbon Upcycling, and leading that as the forefront of everything that we do and completely bypass any waste altogether. We do upcycle a lot of waste to get our feedstocks, but ideally that's where we're seeing ourselves as well. And I think the other thing I would mention too is that One of the reasons that we started OCO in the first place was to really get buyers or consumers aware of this type of material. This is not a material or a technology that's coming 50 years from now. This is happening today. And buyer power is really powerful. If you know that your products are made with captured CO2 emissions, that's a really powerful stance that you can support by looking for products made with this type of technology and other technologies that exist that are similar. So I think that's something that we have a few initiatives under our belt that are coming out pretty quick here. We're looking at creating some trade logos to make sure that we have a better representation of this material so consumers are aware. But that's where we all started, and that's where we come back to a lot of the time, is just making sure that consumers have these options available to them.
Yeah, and Cory, if you have anybody, I know that you have a large audience for this podcast, and myself and Madison, we're spearheading this, but we're also open to very much dealing with other companies. The carbon space has been nice for me because these people have been folks have been very welcoming, because it's different from the packaging industry, which tends to be a little bit more competitive and cutthroat. So if you have any, I know that you attract a big audience. If you have anybody who's got any suggestions for us about, as Madison mentioned, for example, the way that we describe our polypropylene or our LDPE or HDPE or our paper or anything, to show what we are doing. And we're working on symbols, and I know there's lots of conversation about the Mobius symbols and what it really means. And I know that there's changes in regulations in California and Oregon and in the UK and in Europe and all that kind of thing. We obviously have created our own brand of products. Let's put it that way.
It's exciting.
We would love other companies to say, we like this idea. How do you want to work together so we can all profit? Because this idea basically raises all ships. And the more ship owners we can get involved, the better, as far as we're concerned.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think that as we used to say when I studied advertising in college, this idea has legs, and it's got a lot of opportunities here to expand into different environments. If you ran a life cycle analysis with this packaging material that had carbon capture technology in it, would that just blow any other material out of the water as far as sustainability goes?
Madison, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. No, it's a good question. We do our life cycle assessments on our material, and we've had those done from third parties, from universities. So we do have a baseline of what our material is in particular. And then, of course, finding life cycle assessments for other resins is something that we can tap into. So we can easily find the carbon emission equivalent for each kilogram of material produced. That's very easy for us to do. And so we actually, for a lot of the companies that we work with, we'll do a product level analysis for them. It's very basic. It's a little calculator that we created, but it's something that is quite valuable to them if they don't have the capacity to do that internally. There are other materials, like I'll include other things in those LCA calculations that have great carbon footprints, like that maybe not carbon negative, but close to it, or carbon neutral. And so that's something that we can look into as well. And we're more than happy to include these other materials in our assessments. Typically, though, we like to look at kind of a product from a baseline and look at how much we can reduce that material footprint overall. So that's really important for us to note, is that we look at it from a baseline, how much can we reduce the overall footprint of that material.
It's exciting. It's such an exciting possibility. A lot of people are talking about net zero and zero waste to landfill and all of these primers that they're trying to meet. We want to get to this level of carbon neutrality by such and such a year. It seems like this could really skyrocket that process for a lot of companies who are struggling to meet goals that they set for 2025 and 2030 and beyond. So are you finding people coming to you saying, we don't know what else to do, help?
Yeah, it happens quite frequently where we have companies that come to us and they've set these net zero targets, but they're not quite sure the road mapping on how to achieve that or what initiatives they have to undertake. Of course, our material and our solution is just one of many. There is no silver bullet out there. And I think that's something that we very much want to amplify, is that we need all of the solutions to get to a net zero future. Of course, we're saying greenwashing or technologies that aren't making impact should be included within that, but genuine solutions do need to be all encompassing, and there's so much more beyond just a material viewpoint that we can look at to reduce emissions overall. But absolutely, yeah, we're more than happy to consult on decarbonization strategies and where we can take these companies going further, and even just giving them a different perspective on how they should be setting their targets and their roadmaps for hitting the goals that they've set for themselves.
Nick, you had something?
Cory, we get, as I said, we get real differences in levels of understanding, and it's been a little bit of a surprise to both me and Madison. I think that we turn around and say, yeah, we'll do your life cycle analysis, and they get it half an hour. People say just, how did you manage to do that? And well, this is what we're doing for a living. That's been interesting to us. And also the level of understanding and the level of misunderstanding between our customer base is just massive. And I think I would love to be able to sit on LinkedIn all day and chime in, but neither me nor Madison unfortunately has the time. And so there is actually an option, guys. You could look at this, you could look at that. And maybe that's something that if we free up, we will get to. But at the moment we're trying to make people aware, and someone like you with your background and stuff, I'm sure that you see it and you see the potential for it, and you'll probably sit there and think they could do this, they could do that.
Got a lot of ideas for you.
You sit in the car and you think you could do that. Yeah, you can make any of these things. It really is limitless what we could do with this process. As we build more reactors, as we put them in sites, as we put them on site, as we put them in places that would otherwise be very large emitters of CO2. The US is bad, and there are places that are worse.
You may want to consider changing the name of the reactor to something less scary for us Americans.
Yeah,
call it
3 Mile Island. We got this 3 Mile Island machine.
Let's call it a carbon capture box or something like that.
Yeah.
But no, I'm excited for you. I'll continue to advocate for what you're doing, and really thank you both. Is there anything I didn't ask you wish I would have?
No, this has been great. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you both. This might be a part one of a series. I think we need to talk more about this because I want to hear what companies are coming to you, what kinds of items that you're putting carbon into. And I think this is going to be an exciting future of sustainable packaging.
Yeah, and you'll be able to see, we'll feed you, Cory, probably through Eva.
Yeah.
Developments.
Yeah, thank you.
The first one will probably be in the market in about a month and a half's time. And that will be logical.
Easy.
Then there'll probably be mascaras, there'll be stuff that's in our industry. We've been talking to this supplements company, a large vitamin supplements company. We've been talking to them for a long time. And they reached out to me last night and said, I think that we're ready to look at this more seriously. Can you send more pieces and all this kind of thing? They're a large company.
Thank you, Landsberg Aurora, for sponsoring the podcast. If you're listening, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next episode, and stay tuned for more.